Welcome back. If this is your first time here, this channel is simple. At the end of your day, when the noise has settled and the world has finally gone quiet, we take one of the books that actually matters and we walk through it together. Slowly. No rush, no agenda. Just the ideas, delivered at the pace of someone who wants you to actually absorb them. So get comfortable. Let your body get heavy. And let's spend the next little while putting something worth keeping into your mind before you sleep. Tonight we are talking about money, not in the way that makes you feel behind, not in the way that lists the things you should have done differently, or the habits you need to adopt immediately, or the number of income streams a serious person is supposed to have by now. We are talking about money the way a wise and unhurried friend might talk about it. Someone who has thought carefully about it for a long time, who has no agenda, who is not trying to sell you anything, and who genuinely believes that understanding how you think about money matters far more than any specific financial strategy you could ever follow. The book is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, published in 2020. One of the most quietly important books about wealth and human behavior written in a generation. Housel is a former columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a partner at the Collaborative Fund. He is not a guru. He is not promising you a system. He is offering something rarer and more valuable than a system. He is offering perspective. The book opens with a story about two men, and the contrast between them sets up everything that follows. The first man is Ronald Read, a janitor from Vermont who worked at a gas station and later as a janitor at JCPenney. He lived quietly, drove an old car, wore second-hand clothes, and by all outward appearances was an ordinary man of modest means. When he died in 2014 at the age of 92, he left an estate worth nearly $8 million. Most of it went to his local hospital and library. Almost nobody who knew him had any idea. The second man is Richard Foscone, a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA and a career that by any conventional measure was a stunning success. He made enough money in finance to retire early. And then, in the 2000s, he borrowed heavily to expand a mansion in Connecticut. The market turned and he ended up filing for bankruptcy. A janitor outperformed a finance executive by an almost incomprehensible margin. Housel uses this story not to make a point about class or credentials, but to make a point about behavior. Ronald Read was patient, he was frugal, he saved consistently for decades without drama or fanfare. He let time and compound interest do what they do when you simply do not get in the way. Richard Foscone, for all his sophistication and knowledge, let something else take over. Call it overconfidence. Call it impatience. Call it the belief that someone smart enough to succeed in finance should be able to leverage his way to even more. The lesson Housel draws is the one he returns to throughout the entire book. Financial success is not primarily about intelligence or knowledge or even strategy. It is about behavior. And behavior is driven by psychology. And psychology is something almost none of our financial education ever addresses. The first big idea Housel introduces is that no one is crazy. This sounds simple. It is actually profound, and it is one of the most compassionate ideas in the book. He points out that every financial decision a person makes, however irrational it might look from the outside, makes sense given the experiences, fears, and beliefs that person has accumulated over a lifetime. Someone who grew up in genuine poverty and hoards cash even when investing would be smarter is not being irrational. They are responding to a lived experience of scarcity that left a mark. Someone who gambles on volatile investments is not necessarily foolish. They may simply never have seen patient long-term investing actually work in their own life, and a lottery ticket mentality is the only model they have. We all come to money shaped by our childhoods, our families, the economic era we grew up in, the stories we witnessed. A person who grew up during the Great Depression has a relationship with money that is simply different from someone who came of age during the longest bull market in history. Neither is wrong. Both are responding to the reality they actually experienced. This matters enormously for how you judge yourself. The financial decisions you have made, the ones you regret, the ones that look obvious in retrospect, were made by a person working with a particular set of experiences and beliefs and fears. Understanding that does not mean excusing everything, but it means approaching your own financial history and other people's with something closer to compassion than judgment. Now let's talk about what Housel considers the most powerful force in wealth building. And it is not income. It is not investment strategy. It is not even frugality in the conventional sense. It is time. Specifically, it is compound interest operating over long periods of time. And the reason most people underestimate it is that human beings are not naturally good at understanding exponential growth. We think in straight lines. Compound interest does not move in a straight line. Housel uses Warren Buffett as an example. Buffett is almost universally considered the greatest investor of his era. His investment returns are extraordinary. But Housel points out something that almost never gets mentioned in discussions of Buffett's genius. Buffett started investing at age 10. He was worth $1 million by his early 30s. He is now worth many billions. But here is the thing. The vast majority of his wealth, over 90% of it, was accumulated after his 50th birthday. Not because his returns got better, because he had been compounding for so long that the numbers became almost incomprehensible. Housel asks a simple question. What if Buffett had started investing at 30 like most people? What if he had stopped at 60 to enjoy retirement? His net worth, with the same investment skill, would be a fraction of what it actually is. The secret to Buffett's wealth is not just skill, it is time. Decades and decades of patient, consistent compounding. This is not exciting advice. It does not make for a good headline. But Housel argues it is the most important financial truth available to anyone, and it is largely ignored because our culture is addicted to speed, and our financial media is addicted to drama, and neither of those things has room for the quiet, unglamorous, profoundly powerful truth of just waiting. One of the most important chapters in the book is about what Housel calls getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. He says these are two completely different skills, and success at one does not guarantee success at the other. Getting wealthy requires taking risks, being optimistic, putting yourself out there, making bets. Some of those bets will pay off. That is how wealth is built. Staying wealthy requires almost the opposite. It requires humility, frugality, the constant recognition that the same boldness that built the wealth can destroy it if it is not balanced by an equally strong commitment to preservation. Housel says the people who are best at staying wealthy share one quality above almost all others. They are genuinely afraid of losing what they have, not paralyzed by that fear, but respectful of it. They know that a single catastrophic mistake can erase what took decades to build. And so they maintain a margin of safety. They do not borrow to the limit. They do not bet everything on any single outcome. They build in room for things to go wrong because they know things will sometimes go wrong. He calls this being financially unbreakable, and he argues it is more valuable than being financially brilliant. Because a person with average returns who never makes a catastrophic mistake will, over a lifetime, outperform a brilliant investor who occasionally makes catastrophic mistakes. Survival is the strategy. Staying in the game long enough for compounding to work is the whole game. Now let's talk about something Housel addresses with particular care: the role of luck and risk in financial outcomes. He opens this section with a story about Bill Gates. Gates attended one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer terminal in 1968. The odds of any given American teenager having access to that kind of technology at that moment in history were infinitesimally small. Gates happened to attend that school. He happened to be the kind of person who became obsessed with that terminal. And the rest is the history of personal computing. This is not to diminish Gates's intelligence or work ethic or vision. Those were real and extraordinary. But Housel says honest accounting of great financial success almost always includes a significant element of luck, of being in the right place, of being born in the right era, of a door opening that happened to be in your particular hallway. And he pairs this with an equally honest accounting of risk. The same force that can give you unexpected good fortune can take things away from you through no fault of your own. People lose jobs in recessions they did not cause. Businesses are destroyed by technologies they could not have predicted. Perfectly reasonable financial plans are undone by medical emergencies or family crises or historical events that nobody saw coming. The lesson he draws is not fatalism, it is humility. Be careful about how much credit you take for your successes, because luck played a role you cannot fully measure. Be equally careful about how much blame you assign to others or yourself for failures, because risk is real, and sometimes things go wrong that had no business going wrong. This is one of the most psychologically freeing ideas in the book. The story you tell yourself about your financial life, about whether you are a success or a failure, whether you made good decisions or bad ones, is almost certainly more complicated than the simple narrative you have constructed. Hold it a little more loosely. Housel has a chapter about saving that reframes the entire concept in a way that is worth sitting with. Most people think about saving in relation to something. Saving for retirement, saving for a house, saving for college, saving for a specific goal. Housel recommends saving for nothing, or more precisely, saving for the value of having options. He calls it the highest form of wealth, and it is not a number in an account. It is the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want. He points out that the most valuable thing money can buy for most people is not a bigger house or a nicer car or more impressive vacations. It is control over their time. The ability to say no to things that make them miserable. The ability to take time off when they need it. The ability to leave a job that is damaging them. The ability to show up for the people they love without constantly calculating whether they can afford to. That kind of freedom does not require enormous wealth. It requires enough. Enough of a cushion that the unexpected does not destroy you. Enough saved that you have choices rather than only obligations. And the way to build that cushion is not to wait until you have a specific goal to save for. It is to make saving a habit that is independent of any goal. To live below your means not as a sacrifice, but as a form of freedom you are purchasing with every dollar you do not spend. There is a chapter in the book that addresses something most financial writing completely ignores: the question of what enough actually means. Housel tells the story of Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller at a party hosted by a billionaire. Vonnegut mentions to Heller that their host made more money in a single day than Heller ever earned from Catch-22, and Heller says, "Yes, but I have something he will never have: enough." Housel says that the inability to know when enough is one of the most dangerous forces in financial life. And not just financial life. It is the engine behind some of the most spectacular falls from grace in business history. People who had more than they could ever need, continuing to take risks that made no rational sense because the goalpost kept moving. Because enough was always just a little more than whatever they currently had. He says the antidote to this is not lowering your ambition. It is anchoring your sense of enough to something internal rather than external, to what actually makes your life feel rich in the non-financial sense, rather than to what the next benchmark of success looks like from the outside. This requires knowing yourself, knowing what you actually enjoy, what actually gives your days meaning. What kind of life, when you imagine it clearly and honestly, feels genuinely satisfying rather than just impressive. That knowledge is worth more than any investment strategy, because without it, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. And with it, you may discover that enough is closer than you thought. Housel dedicates significant space to the concept of reasonable versus rational when it comes to financial decisions. And this distinction is quietly important. Rational financial decisions are the ones that maximize expected value, that a computer program running the numbers would recommend, that a finance textbook would endorse. Reasonable financial decisions are the ones that you can actually live with, that let you sleep at night, that do not require you to ignore your emotions or pretend you are something other than a human being who is affected by fear and uncertainty and the opinions of the people around you. Housel says reasonable beats rational almost every time for most people, not because the math is wrong, but because a strategy you can stick to through the frightening moments is worth far more than an optimal strategy you will abandon the first time the market drops 20% and your stomach drops with it. He gives the example of keeping more cash than the textbooks recommend. Purely rationally, that cash should be invested. It is losing ground to inflation. It is not working as hard as it could. But for many people, having a meaningful cash cushion is the thing that allows them to stay invested in everything else when times get hard. The peace of mind it buys is real and valuable, even if it does not show up on a spreadsheet. Know yourself. Build a financial life around who you actually are rather than who a rational actor in a finance textbook is supposed to be. The final idea I want to leave you with tonight is Housel's concept of the seduction of pessimism. He observes that pessimism sounds smarter than optimism in almost every context. The person who predicts disaster sounds serious and sophisticated and clear-eyed. The person who predicts that things will probably be okay sounds naive. But the long arc of history, Housel points out, bends relentlessly toward growth, innovation, problem-solving, and human flourishing. Not in a straight line, not without catastrophes along the way, but consistently, over the long term, in a direction that rewards the patient optimist far more than the sophisticated pessimist. The stock market has survived world wars, depressions, pandemics, political crises, and every imaginable form of disaster. And it is higher today than it has ever been. Not because the pessimists were wrong about every individual crisis, but because the optimists were right about the underlying direction of human progress. Housel is not asking you to ignore risk. He is asking you to balance your assessment of risk with an equally clear-eyed assessment of the remarkable human capacity to adapt, innovate, and find a way through. The world is going to be okay, not perfectly, not without difficulty, but directionally over time in the ways that matter for patient long-term investors and patient long-term human beings. It is going to be okay. You are going to be okay. So as you close your eyes tonight, here is what the psychology of money most wants to leave with you. You do not need to be brilliant to build a financial life that serves you. You need to be patient. You need to be consistent. You need to avoid catastrophic mistakes. You need to save not for a specific goal, but for the freedom that options provide. You need to know what enough means to you before the goalpost moves again. And you need to stay in the game long enough for time to do what only time can do. None of that requires a finance degree. None of it requires a high income or a perfect start or having made all the right decisions so far. It requires behavior, and behavior is something you can work on, starting from exactly where you are. The best time to start was a long time ago. The second best time is now. And now, as it happens, is exactly where you are. Rest well. You have time. More than you think, and less than you might like, and exactly enough to do something meaningful with. Good night. Sonnet 4.6